Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper, and today we have royalty, Salisbury royalty in our midst, former Mayor Barrie Tilghman.
Hi, Greg. It's great to be here.
Now, you were the mayor for the longest part of my career, and you and I had some epic encounters during your tenure as mayor, as anybody who's the editor and the mayor normally would.
Well, you would hope they would.
You would hope they would. And recently I wrote a little column where I mentioned some history with the mayors. And I wanted to talk to you about that just a little bit because I kind of skated over some of your stuff and I felt like I didn't do you the service that I probably should have because your service was significant. And I think, the more I think about it, it plays a big factor in what happens next in Salisbury as we transition to yet another new mayor. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think that's true. I think that when I was elected in 1998, the city was ready for a new direction. I think they were ready to be more involved in their government, more a part of the decision making. And we really reached down to go to each of the different neighborhoods in the city and to be accessible and tried to be accessible to a lot of different interests, because certainly one of the things that I knew going in, but I really felt very keenly while I was in there, is the importance of having the business community involved with the government. And we did some of that. Initially, there was some real serious concern that I would forget that.
Right. Now, the old way of doing it, and you talk about good old boys, and you kind of, people use that stereotype all the time, but basically the Greater Salisbury Committee and the chamber folks would just call the mayor and they would meet and discuss what they wanted to do. And that was the mayor's probably his biggest constituency in terms of pleasing people and trying to figure out what the problems were. But you were able to identify problems from people out in the neighborhoods. That's what I always derive from your leadership.
Well, I think, and that gets back to my roots in political involvement. When Matt and I lived in Pennsylvania, we got involved in our neighborhood and then in the downtown and revitalization and things like that. And when we came back to Salisbury, I became involved because of concern over my neighborhood, Camden, at the time. We were away for 7 years, and it became a large student housing. That was a big issue. Right. 20 years ago.
And Camden was a neighborhood that didn't get a lot of city attention, or at least not to the extent that the people in Newtown did.
Well, I think there was a sense there for a while, just like when, probably predating my arrival on the scene, even my physical arrival on the scene, the center, the political epicenter of the city was the east side. You had Mayor Rollie Hastings, Senator Joe Long, Delegate Norman Conway, all hailing from
Paul
the
Martin
east side.
lived there.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And then
Jack Elliott on your council was from the east side
initially.
Yeah.
But I think that what happened when I became mayor was, or when I moved back to Salisbury, there was a real there had been a political outcry in Newtown over some traffic issues and things like that. So that was viewed as the center. And I think basically it was because that's where people who were politically very active lived. And then it moved. I think that one of the reasons that I felt that it was important for people in different neighborhoods and different areas of the city to be involved was a project I did right before I ran for mayor, and that was in Canal Woods. There was the effort to annex land adjacent to Canal Woods, which was a great idea, and to continue what had been a closed street for 25 years.
It would have become a thoroughfare.
Exactly,
basically.
exactly. And the residents at Canal Woods did not want that. And over their stiff opposition to it, the council did annex the land with the special provision that the road would be extended through the new development. And the neighbors, I worked with the neighbors to do a petition to take that to referendum, and they were successfully able to keep it from happening. And I think that's, you realize how much can happen when people feel strongly about something. So let's take that. It doesn't always have to be in opposition to something. It can be in favor of something.
Right.
And so that played really into my thinking when I became mayor. I thought, there's just a lot of talent, a lot of energy out there, and these people can make a difference. And they really, really did. I mean, I remember one time there were some rentals in Newtown that just were not, by any stretch of the imagination, up to code, and it was before we had tightened a lot of the codes and instituted the Neighborhood Services Department and passed landlord licensing. So we went out there, the Neighborhood Roundtable, we went out and we picketed. And within a few weeks, the properties were sold. So I think that there's just a lot of, there's just a tremendous amount of energy. I think we're seeing that today in terms of the resurgence downtown.
Right.
I think that's exceptionally exciting to me, because that was one of the things that we talked about during my first campaign, and we were able to get the plaza open to traffic. And you know, downtown is not a pretty place, just a pretty place to look at. It's a fun place to be and live. And
but that was sort of a trap with that downtown, because you kind of relied on the downtown redevelopment, whatever the group was called at the time.
The we created Urban Salisbury,
okay.
yeah.
So you relied on sort of these people being intermediaries between government and business. And you see now where, like, it seems like the leaders are going directly to the developers and making it their idea, or at least listening to their ideas.
Well, I think that was partially the charge of Urban Salisbury.
Right.
I think what happened was, quite frankly, with the professional leadership that was hired was very weak.
Right.
And they did not do that.
They just didn't get it somehow.
They just somehow just didn't seem to put it together. I mean, we see what's happening now. Certainly the board of Urban Salisbury got it and tried very hard to put together some different projects. Tom Becker was very active when he was the president, trying to put together a project on the two large lots 1 and 2, between the library and downtown Main Street. And it just, for a lot of reasons that had very little to do with downtown, didn't work out. The economics of it didn't work out at that time. But we're starting to see that now. And I think that there are, nationwide, there's a real trend toward young people going downtown.
Right.
And we were at the very beginning of that, and I think we're seeing that now with a lot of the enthusiasm and the excitement. I mean, you see, Jake Day, the president of council, who's just very, very involved in all of that, and the mayor has certainly been a champion of that. And I think that that we're able to tap into that. You see what's happening in Berlin, and I always say that Salisbury, everybody said, oh, well, we're not Berlin. No, we're Salisbury. We have a river. We have a university.
Yeah.
We have how many thousands of people who come to this town every week to take advantage of the retail that exists at the north end and the south end, and they will come. A certain percentage of those will come downtown.
Right.
And it's just, we have to give them. It's the field of dreams, and I think that there's just a momentum that is hopefully approaching a critical mass down there. And,
right.
And I think that that's the energy, and that's just kind of thinking, looking at what's happening nationally, and what other cities are doing, best practices. I think that the study that was done incorporated the Hyatt Palma study that was done in, I think, 99 or 2000, really hit the nail right on the head. I think that the voluntary board work that was done was outstanding. I do think that the professional leadership just didn't ever, I don't want to say if they didn't get it, but they didn't do it.
Or they couldn't rally the support that they needed.
Yeah, I think there was that. I think there were still some, things that were going on with regard to some larger issues that kind of kept attention away from that.
I mean, the Hyatt Palma plan and what they're talking about with the redevelopment now, that plan's similar in a lot of ways. Yeah. But the problem with Hyatt Palma was no one was able to get a developer excited about doing it. Right. And the city didn't have the money to do it all on their own.
No, and I don't think the city, should be the one to do it. If you look again, don't want to overuse Berlin, but Berlin really jump-started, 20-some years ago when a group of local people got together and, said we're going to save the Atlantic Hotel, and that became the anchor, if you will. And I think that there's a lot more interest locally in people getting involved. They've gone from the third Friday, which has been extraordinarily well received, to the first Saturday, and I just think that, Headquarters Live, I mean, it's moving along, and I think it's a matter now of looking at what's happening in other places, using some of the tax credits, like the heritage tax credits, which are made for a historic district like downtown, to make projects feasible. They make the difference. There's a new tax credit called the Small Commercial Tax Credit through Sustainable Communities, Maryland Department of Planning, and it just is as though it were designed for downtown Salisbury.
Now, when you were mayor, you pretty much never had a council that was supportive. They would support you for a little while, but things always turned, and I always felt bad for you because I never really thought it was all your fault. So
not all my fault.
Well, when I first came, it was Palmer Gillis and Bobby Cannon and those guys, Frank Hemmelwright. They were going to do things their way, and I don't think they ever showed you the proper respect that they should have. I'm not sure they showed it to Mayor Martin either, but at least toward the end. But they never really showed you that respect. Then the council that replaced them were people who were not really that well equipped, I think, to be on the city council. Nothing against any of them, but there wasn't a lot of cohesion there, and it got worse, and it got better for a little while, and then it got worse. But I felt like your surrounding characters were never what you really deserved. Did you feel the same way?
I don't know that they weren't what I deserved. I certainly think the first council I went into was basically, I think, I don't want to be simplistic here, but people who didn't understand or didn't want to grasp the role, the separation of powers. That's a shared thing, mayor and council.
Right.
And there were some council people with whom I worked beautifully. I mean, there was the council that was accused of being in my pocket when they were anything but in my pocket. When Mike Dunn was the council president,
right, yeah,
and Gary Comegys and Lynn Cathcart, and there were others on there, and I mean we had a good working relationship. But I mean that was because I think they clearly understood that their role was to legislate.
Well, and their election was a reaction to some of the things that had happened before. I remember being at an awful meeting, and I forget who even was the council president, but there's that moment where you have to serve as the leader, you sit there with the gavel, and a new council president's elected. And I think at the time I wrote, the Banana Republic, Politics of Salisbury Continues. It really felt like that. It felt like whoever was going to assassinate the other person was going to end up being in charge, either verbally or physically. Yeah. I mean, there was that sort of feeling about it, and you were having to preside in the middle of all this.
Well, I do think that when I came into office, the old saying, nature abhors a vacuum. And I think that for the last few years of Mayor Martin's last term, I think he was tired.
Yeah.
He was aging, but I think Mrs. Martin was quite ill,
right.
And I think that was absorbing a lot of his attention.
He vetoed landlord licensing from his hospital bed.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He did, and that wasn't. I mean, that was not the only chapter in the tortured history of landlord licensing.
Yeah.
But I think that because there was a little bit of a power vacuum. I think that the council stepped up and was.
I think you're right.
Was stepping over the border into administrative roles. I had a very, very close friend and advisor who told me the first week I was in office, the council needs to understand who the mayor is.
Right.
And I think that there was some, the frustration in that. And I was not the choice of the council, and the memo never reached everyone that, you kind of put it all on the back burner then until the next election.
Right.
But I do think that the council that I worked with, the council that Mike Dunn chaired when everyone or many people wanted to take Mike to task and for being everything being a done deal, it wasn't. It was just clearly a situation where they understood that I was the mayor. And I remember, Gary and Mike coming into my office one Friday afternoon, and they had been driving around, and they were frustrated with the state of some of the neighborhoods. Instead of jumping up on the soapbox and using the council gavel and the council chambers to say, what are we going to do?
Calling a news conference.
Yes, exactly, on the steps of the courthouse. They came to me and said, what is it going to take to get this thing headed in the right direction?
We'll write the check, yeah.
Yeah, and that wasn't quite that good. It was
we'll take the money from somewhere else.
But I said, I believe we need a department that focuses on neighborhoods. He says, well, you and John and the department heads put the flesh on the bones, and we'll take it under advisement. And that was the kind of attitude that got us to the point where we ended up with a department that was solely focused on neighborhood services and code compliance. That got us to the point where we had a true interdepartmental approach to the problems in the neighborhood. John and I had been working on that, but I think once we had a department that could focus and could rally the other departments, things improved. That was the spirit that led to landlord licensing, that led to the changing the density. And I do think working with the university and the whole landscape has changed down there with regard to housing. I mean, I think there's a huge complex coming online this fall again,
Right.
and that's taking a lot of the kids out of the neighborhoods. And we all have rentals in our neighborhoods. The only way to avoid having a rental around you is to buy 10 acres out in the country
Right.
and move out there, which one of the larger landlords actually has. Or retired landlords. But I do think that, I have many more rentals in my neighborhood now because of the recession. And so we all live in a mixed kind of urban environment, which, I think many of us like. But I think that the ongoing, the unrelenting challenge that we were facing from the students has been helped with working with the university and getting those projects online, and also a lot of the restrictions. I mean, it's a two-way street.
See, when I think about you losing your base, which I wrote, I think about landlord licensing, or I think about the 3-2, 4-2 as that being the issue. In that, you being a pro-neighborhoods person, the attitude was she's going to kick their butt and we're going to take back our neighborhoods and there's not going to be any more rentals. And then suddenly you're at a table and it's either going to be 3-2, 4-2, whatever, and you all passed this law. The landlord licensing wasn't perhaps as strict as some of your supporters wanted it to be. So it looks like, the mayor is selling out to the landlords, all this stuff that they say back and forth. But then the landlords aren't your friends either because you are trying to hold them accountable to a degree. They don't want any business license at all.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to the council, I would say, I'm working off the top of my head here, within the year that landlord licensing was passed, and said, we need a fee on every rental unit, not every landlord.
Right.
So we tightened, it was
the landlords were outraged, but I don't know what they would have expected.
Well, I think that the landlord licensing had been such a hot
if you buy a fleet
topic.
of cars, you got to put a tag on
true.
every car. I mean,
well, that's true. Now the landlords would say, well, we're licensed, or we're regulated, excuse me,
Right.
by HUD and all those and different things. And I say, okay, that's all well and good, but you're absolutely right. And we always said that, if you're going to do nails and you're going to do hair, you have to get a license,
Right.
So it seems to me to rent, and I think too, once we established a neighborhood service department and we're doing inspections, we were finding some pretty egregious health and safety code. Not just, this is not a positive addition to this neighborhood, this is just a health and safety issue.
Right.
So I think the 4-2 issue was not initially all that well thought out. I think it was a reaction of a small group that really wanted to just do something. And I think that there were arguments for the validity of it, but I think it had the potential to hurt other neighborhoods, because you weren't going to say, okay, we're going to put, if you're going to go down to 2 people in a house, we're still going to have X number of renters that are going to need houses. Are we going to put them on a train and send them over to Ocean City and
Right.
tell them, they're out of Salisbury? And I think it had the tendency to be somewhat discriminatory, and it had the tendency to go ahead and say, well, you go into another neighborhood. And, there was initial thing, when the thing was proposed by the residents of the Camden neighborhood, that it would be for the Camden neighborhood. And then I think when they came under scrutiny that was maybe a little elitist, they said, oh, we meant the whole city. And I think that, one size doesn't fit all. And I think...
Yeah, I wouldn't have had any problem with it in the Camden neighborhood.
Yeah, well, I just think that a lot of the people in a lot of the other neighborhoods felt that, well, that's just going to push a lot of people into,
Right.
And I think that, my hesitation, and I did sign it, and I did enforce it, my hesitation was the law of unintended consequences. I was very concerned about that. But I also think that the reason I did sign it, I had an email from a constituent, had been a supporter, and it was very well thought out, unlike some of the things I received and over the time. But this one, most of them always were well thought out. But this one was well thought out, and it made the point, when are we going to do something meaningful?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that as much as anything, we need to send a signal that we are going to do what we can do.
Right.
And I think to some extent it's had some positive things. I don't think it's been a silver bullet. I don't think there is any silver bullet. I think that over time, the evolution of a lot of the students into some of these complexes. I mean, since I took office, you've had University Park, University Village, what is it, University Oaks or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And the Seagull Square.
Yeah.
And now the one further down on Dykes Road.
The public-private has gone.
Yes.
You've gotten the kids off Hazel Street now, basically.
Yeah. But then the challenge becomes, what are you going to do with the houses on Hazel Avenue? And,
right.
And that's where I think you need more of a unified approach. And I think that there's some models that we can look out there.
Well, not to make it about me, but I always do. I've been looking for a house in that Pinehurst neighborhood, and every house I inquire about, I'm immediately bidding against a landlord.
Really?
Yeah, because someone wants to convert that to some sort of a college rental situation, or rent it to a professor or some kind of transient thing. So I can see that keeping the prices higher in that neighborhood. And in fact, I even looked at a house in your neighborhood right across the street from where you live, and I didn't get far with it because I got it in late. But there were some landlord companies who were looking at that house as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that...
So they're a player in this local real estate market.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. And it's not all about students. I had a landlord tell me that there's a real market here for what they call executive rentals.
Exactly, yeah.
And those are the people where you can't tell whether they're renters or they're homeowners. But
and they're never home anyway.
Yeah, that's they're always working or going back to wherever their family is. But I do think that, I mean, students are not gone, but I think that the whole thing is considerably different than it was 15 or 20 years ago. I mean, I remember Dr. Bellavance at a meeting in the council chambers with members of the Camden neighborhood. I'm going back over 25 years. Long before I had visions of being mayor dancing in my head. Basically folding his arms, and his body language was, no, it ain't going to happen. He was not going to take responsibility for his kids off campus. And I think successive presidents have done that.
Right.
And that has helped some. I mean, we have a major university in our city, and that's a very good thing, and it's a very challenging thing. I'm thinking that over time, the university's push to the East Campus and the development of that area is going to...
Yeah, the university had a meeting recently at the church in your old neighborhood on the corner there. And a good turnout, and Robbie Sheen was there leading it, and I'd never heard of the university going out into the neighborhood asking, what can we do to make things better?
Yeah, and I think that started. I think that when I was elected, I remember my favorite headline was in the Seagull, the Flyers.
The Flyer, yeah.
The week I was elected, it said, Tilghman's election sends SU tumbling. and I got a call from the president within a few days saying, we've got to talk, and...
Was it Dr. Merwin or Joel?
Yes, it was Bill Merwin. Yeah. And then he threw out the idea of getting together and having the initial neighborhood compact where we would come together on a regular basis, which I'm going to assume is still happening. As last I heard, it was still happening, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, and I lived in that neighborhood for 18 years. And I know the challenges that you face when someone comes to your door thinking that's their door.
Yeah, where you lived on Camden, it was a fishbowl. I mean, I drove by and looked in your windows twice a day, just in my normal going around town. I mean, Barry's home, Barry's not home, whatever Barry is.
And I loved living where I lived because I could sit on my sun porch on the corner of Monticello and Camden, and I could be working on something, and I'd say, oh, there goes so-and-so. Wonder where they're going. Are they doing carpool today? So I loved Camden.
Yeah.
We lived on Forest Lane next to Jake Day's parents and Jake. Known Jake since he was my grandchildren's age now. So, and then we moved around for almost 14 years on the corner of Camden, and it was a fishbowl, and there were Friday nights when people would knock on the door and were not in a state to understand they didn't live there.
And I apologize for that.
But
you always had some of the best wine in town.
That's you just thought. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, who isn't serving?
Dr. Jennings' house and your house, and Kel Nagel always was another great stop.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. You learn where the good places are to stop.
Yeah, well,
I'm making all that up.
yeah.
How much do you miss being mayor?
I don't really miss being mayor. I miss the people I worked with. I miss that problem-solving aspect. I miss the...
Someone brings you a problem, you go, I can take care of that.
Well, that and also coming up with a way to take care of it. It was out one day walking, and in my neighborhood now, which is North Salisbury, by North Salisbury School, and there was someone out looking for their dog. Their dog had gotten away, and I was walking around, and I spoke to several people, and then I came back home and drove the car around to try to see if I could find this dog. Found a young couple walking the dog. They had found the dog. Told him where the dog lived, and when Matt got home that night, it was before he retired, I said, that's what I miss about being mayor. I miss helping people, connecting the problem to the solution. And, you know, I miss the people I work with. I miss seeing a lot of the people in the neighborhoods.
Yeah. You could tell that you and John Pick had a relationship, and you and Alan Webster had a bond, which you probably didn't expect when he was hired. But there was definitely a kinship there, you could tell that.
Well, and I think that given a lot of the challenges that the department had been through before Alan Webster got there, he was exactly what the department needed, because, I mean, Al created the kind of environment where the troops knew exactly what to expect. I mean, it wasn't like 1 minute it could be this and the next minute it could be that. I mean, he was slow and steady wins the race, and he was calm and John Pick and I think John was pleasantly surprised, because he didn't know what to expect, you know, because I was an agent of change, and John and I are the same age except for exactly 2 months every year when I'm a year older, and we shared a lot of different history. You know, he grew up in Chicago, I grew up in Allen, Maryland, but we were both somewhere the night Dr. King was shot, and you know, same age, and we, you know, what did you do this weekend? And you know, I'm reading this book, you might like it. So, and John was a steady professional, and it was a joy to work with him. And
you were a change agent. I think that was the key to the whole thing. Whoever won that election, either you or Carol Hall, a woman would have become mayor, but you were a change agent in a way beyond that.
Well, and I think that's you know, what was daunting to members of what we'll call the old guard, I think, was the fact that, you know, there was the charge that people didn't have access to me. Anyone had access to me. Not everyone had, you know, the ability to say, this is what we're all going to do.
Right.
And because it was like, well, let me, you know, I used to say to people, I approach every problem when someone comes to me with, like, I would like to make this work out for you. If in the course of working that through, it becomes obvious it's not in the city's best interest, we're going to have a different discussion, a different direction. But yeah, I think it was the idea that I came in there, and I initially did not want to, I mean, I never saw myself in the front lines of, I love politics, I love the art of the deal, but I always said that the week Bill Clinton was elected, he had multiple thousands of appointments to deal with in a new administration, and James Carville, who executed the deal, made it happen, went to Venice.
Right.
So, you know, who won there? You know, but so I think I would not have run in '98 if there had been someone I felt who was going to bring about that change.
Right. She's Barrie Parsons Tilghman. She's been with us for a long time here in town, and we are completely linked to her some way or another. Thank you, Mayor, for being here today.
Thanks, Greg. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper, another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.